Hey, warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as joining me in segment number 2 for this WCC Conference Preview Edition. We've got Connor Ope joining me as he does so every single year to break down this fine conference. We're going to look at what is now 11 teams in this conference as Washington State, Oregon State, those two teams that were remainders from the Pac-12. It's now the Pac-2. They joined this conference, so we're going to be taking a look at the dynamic of that. We're going to look at all the coaching changes, the transfers, all the nooks and crannies. Trust me when I say Connor leaves no stone unturned when it comes to this conference, so we're going to have a great chat with him in segment number 2. In the final segment, I'm going to get you guys my projector or finish for the WCC, and if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, LRCM, name me does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review. Due to the fact that I'm doing a conference preview edition today, that means that the past 48 hours of college basketball news and notes, those are going to be polished up on the podcast tomorrow, and as I always do in segment number 1, I like to take a look at the trends and just sort of the styles of play of the WCC. So let's dive in right about now, where we've got a lot of teams that they look to go a little bit more offensive focused. Not necessarily that they go super duper up tempo and they're just playing like bats out of HE double hockey sticks or anything like that. At San Diego, they were your fastest team in terms of just total possessions per game at 37th in all of college basketball, and you really didn't have anyone else in this conference that was within the top 85 in terms of total possessions per game. You had a lot of teams that they weren't necessarily playing slowly, but they weren't necessarily absolutely running it and gunning it, like Loyola Marymount, for example. They were actually really slowing things down at about 334th in the country in terms of total possessions per game after they were a middle road team in terms of their total possessions per game. Pepperdine was a super up-tempo team a few seasons ago. The last year under Lorenzo Romar, 315th in the country. Portland was about 205th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for as much as Gonzaga is able to put the ball in the basket, for as efficient as Gonzaga is on the offensive side of things, they were about 170th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Like last year, a lot of teams that typically play up tempo, they really slowed it down. They were still incredibly efficient on the offensive side of things, but it's not like they were absolutely just gunning it or anything like that. And you saw in this conference a lot of teams that were just able to knock it down from three-point range, as Loyola Marymount was one of your best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Didn't necessarily result in a lot of wins as they went 12-19, but they were 27th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. I'll point out Eastern Washington being 29th in terms of three-point shooting percentage. You're going to wonder why, but Washington State is in, and pretty much everyone from Eastern Washington is now on Washington State. So that's a team that figures to be a really good three-point shooting team. For Gonzaga, it's always a little bit hit or miss for them in terms of their three-point shooting, where they're always good as their two-point shooting, and that's why year in and year out, they're a top 10 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They were again last season, but they were 49th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. Pepperdine, 56th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. You had a little bit of an up-and-down season for St. Mary's, but they were able to get things all in line towards the back half of the season as well. So it was just a really interesting conference in general. One where the defenses, if we're calling it what it is, they were a little bit lackluster. Now I will say this for Gonzaga, after it was a very poor defensive effort in the last year under Drew Timme 2 seasons ago. Last year they were able to find a little bit more defense. For Gonzaga, 58th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and you know what you're going to get out of St. Mary's. They are pretty much a team that zags while everyone else zigs in this conference. Number 3 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and in road games, only McNeese gave up fewer points on a per possession basis. They were absolutely rock solid, but Pacific, who they, for the second time in 3 years, had the worst cover rate in all of college basketball. I'll get into the betting trends in a minute, but my goodness, this Pacific team was just an absolute money burner. 360th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Like, I think 5 Martians could have taken the floor and played the same amount of defense that they did, because it was the Olay style defense. And then Pepperdine, 342nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Those were really your main outliers. players, but you saw quite a few teams that they were not doing the world's greatest job of being able to execute on the defensive side of things. San Diego was well outside the top 200 in terms of their points allowed on a per possession basis. Loyola Marymount, 271st in all of college basketball with that regard. You now bring in Oregon State. Oregon State, granted, it was against Pac-12 competition, but they were right there with San Diego. San Diego 257th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Oregon State was 263rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And then you had a very interesting team in Santa Clara that was one of your best rebounding teams in all of college basketball. They were looking to build themselves up there. And I will say, for San Francisco, before we go any further, they were a team that was really able to build themselves up on the defensive side of things as well. For the Dons, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 27th in all of college basketball, but they're going to have a few issues moving forward with regards to how they do things down low. But for Santa Clara, they were about 137th in the country in terms of their points allowed on a per possession basis. And the way that a lot of these teams that aren't Gonzaga and or St. Mary's are looking to be able to build themselves up is on the glass, because little does a lot of people know, St. Mary's was your number one team in the country in terms of rebound rate. Even with Purdue having Zach Edey and company, St. Mary's had a better rebound rate than Purdue last season. And that's all because nobody got second chances on this team. Like, absolutely nobody. And then Santa Clara, 14th in the country in terms of their rebound rate. Gonzaga was 16th in the country in terms of their rebound rate. Washington State was 17th, but again, pretty much everyone from Washington State, the coach, every single one of those players, they're gone. But hey, Washington State, 17th in the country in terms of their overall rebound rate last season. Then the teams that were just absolutely awful in this conference were the teams that were not able to rebound in general. And you did see some of the more middle-of-the-road teams be okay with regards to the glass. San Francisco, as I was alluding to a little bit before, they were 52nd in the country in terms of their overall rebound rate. And for Loyola Marymount, they were 102nd in the country in terms of their overall rebound rate. Meanwhile, you saw Pepperdine and Pacific not necessarily give you the world's greatest effort on the glass. For Pacific, 362nd out of 362 teams on the glass. Oregon State comes in. They were 264th in the country with this regard. Pepperdine, they were 209th in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. For San Francisco, they were able to do a solid job at San Diego, 303rd in the country in terms of rebound rate. And for Portland, all sorts of issues for them as well. 304th in the country with regards to their rebound rate. They were well outside the top 250 in terms of their points allowed on a per possession basis as well. So rebounding, very paramount in this conference. And when it comes to this conference, not the world's greatest amount of travel. This is still one of those mid-majors that very much holds true to the geographical, I guess you could call it, balance. And you don't have a lot of teams that are having to go like multiple states. Even with now expanding to Washington State and Oregon State joining this conference, you already have Portland in the conference. You already have Gonzaga in the conference as well. So it's not really going to be adding a lot of travel. And when it comes to the way that you saw things shake out from an against the spread standpoint in the WCC, you did have quite a few teams that were able to make you some good coin, with Santa Clara being the top of them, 18-12-2 against the spread. San Francisco went 19-14 against the spread. St. Mary's 18-15 against the spread. And then you had a few teams that were a little bit less than profitable. Loyola Marymount, 12-18-1 against the spread. Pepperdine, 13-18 against the spread. So it sounds pretty balanced. And then Pacific, 6-24 against the spread. Dead last in all of college basketball. And guess what? During the 2021-22 season, Pacific, they went 4-22-2 against the spread. Like, you combine these 2 years, 2 out of 3 years, they want to combine 10-48-2 against the spread. Like, that is impossible. I'm not even kidding. Like, you guys can tell right now. It just stuns me that a team can be so unprofitable, but yet somehow, some way they did it. They've been the Chicago White Sox of college basketball the last 3 years. Like, you look at the last 3 years, they are 25-62-2 against the spread. If you were a $100 unit better betting minus 110 against the spread, you're down north of $3,800 betting on this sad team. Like, my goodness gracious. And just for comparison, since the beginning of the 2021 season, your next worst team against the spread, you have to go to Tulsa, 32-55-4 against the spread. Pacific in this time span covered 28.7% of games. Tulsa covered 36.8% of games. Like, my goodness gracious. talk about a skid mark on the underpants of college basketball. But if you're looking at more of these splits that we've seen in terms of WCC, as we calm down a little bit more, you did see Pacific obviously be awful against the spread at home, on the road. Planet Mars, if they went there, they'd be unprofitable there, but you did see home court advantage be pretty big in terms of the conference. We're just going to leave Pacific out of this for the rest of this because they were just sad and pathetic, but Gonzaga went 6-8 against the spread as the home team, and then you saw San Diego go 7-9 against the spread at home. And the reason why for Gonzaga they had such few home games is because they do play a lot of those just strange neutral court games, but you saw quite a few teams be relatively successful at home. Portland was 9-4 against the spread at home. Pepperdine, San Francisco, both 8-7 against the spread at home. St. Mary's 9-8 against the spread at home. So you really didn't have dramatic home and road splits with that regard. And then underdogs in this conference, well, they were not ones that necessarily barked. St. Mary's was 4-0 against the spread as an underdog. Santa Clara was 9-4-1 against the spread as an underdog. But there was actually a team that was worse against the spread as an underdog than Pacific. Pepperdine, 3-13 against the spread as in the role of an underdog. Portland was 10-13 against the spread as an underdog. San Diego was 11-12 against the spread as an underdog. Did have Santa Clara go 9-4-1 against the spread as an underdog, but it was very much a favorite-heavy conference as you had Pepperdine be a bulldozer actually against the spread as a favorite at 10-5. Portland went 5-3 against the spread as a favorite. San Francisco 14-10 against the spread as a favorite. The one team that couldn't come through was shock, surprise, Pacific 0-5 against the spread as a favorite. And then you did have Loyola Marymount as well go 8-12 against the spread as a favorite, but it was very much a favorite-heavy conference. And when it comes to the WCC, even though you didn't necessarily have a lot of teams that played super-duper up-tempo, as a matter of fact, there was a departure in terms of the quickness of the conference. Many of these teams, if you added up everyone in the conference, it was about 50-50 in terms of overs and unders. Your best team to the under was Portland, 18 unders, 12 overs, and 1 push. Pacific went 17 unders and 13 overs. Santa Clara, 16 unders, 14 overs, and 2 pushes. And then you had San Diego, 18 and 13 to the over. Loyola Marymount, 17 overs to 14 unders. San Francisco, St. Mary's, they both had 18 overs to 15 unders. And when you looked at things in terms of the non-conference portion of the schedule, that's where you saw a lot of these teams be able to hit those unders, because it was a little bit shocking to see teams like Pepperdine, to see teams like Loyola Marymount really slow it down, and that's where you were able to make your money on these unders. And then in conference play, when the efficiency for these offenses kicked back up, that's where you were able to make some money on overs. The only team that had played more than 50% of their non-conference games to the over was Gonzaga, 9 overs, 7 unders. And then you had Santa Clara, Loyola Marymount both be 7-7 in non-conference games to the over. Pacific, 10 unders, 3 overs outside the conference. Portland, 9 unders to 4 overs. You had San Francisco go 9 unders to 6 overs, 7 unders to 6 overs for both San Diego and Pepperdine, and then St. Mary's, 8 unders to 7 overs. Meanwhile, once you got to conference play, that's where you were able to hit quite a few of those overs. San Diego, San Francisco, 12-6 to the over in conference play. St. Mary's, 11 overs, 7 unders. And then you have Pepperdine, Loyola Marymount, Pacific, all either go 10 overs, 7 unders, or 10 overs, 7 unders, and a push. Really, your lone teams that were successful to the under in the conference was Santa Clara, 9 unders, 7 overs, and 2 pushes. Gonzaga, 10 unders, 8 overs, and then Portland, 9 unders, 8 overs, and a push. So, very interesting conference with one big giant rusty anchor in Pacific, which it can't get much worse for them, but how much better is it going to get for so many of these other teams in the conference? We're going to be looking at every single one of these teams in the conference next with our good friend Connor Ope, who does amazing work over at Heat Check CBB, and he joins me on the flip side here on Cuts Cuts Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Decent Family Podcast, the WCC Conference Preview Edition. And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Cuts Cuts Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Decent Family Podcast. This is the WCC Conference Preview Edition, and this has become a tradition on this fine podcast, getting Connor Hope to preview it. He does such a great job over at Check CBB, taking a look at this great game of college basketball. He does a lot of tremendous written work for them. On top of that, he is one of the co-hosts of the Heat Check CBB Hangout. He, Brian Ruff, Riley Davis, they do a tremendous job on that front, as that's a fun show/podcast that they put together over there as well. You're able to follow Connor on Twitter/X at HoopsHopeCBB all together. And Connor, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me, Connor. And it is going to be a really interesting conference. And how about if we start with what has changed first? And Oregon State and Washington State joining the conference. And we'll start with Oregon State because let's call it what it is. It's the lesser of the two teams that we've seen Oregon State have some not so great runs out there last few seasons in the Pac-12. How does a step down to the WCC make you view this team? One that ever since that Elite Eight run, they just have not been able to find it. But I actually do think that this could be a little bit of a positive for them just to be able to get a few more wins than they've gotten the last few seasons.
I think it's going to be tough for Oregon State because, let's be honest, the Elite Eight run was great for that season. It might have been the worst possible outcome for the long-term prospects of Oregon State. Obviously, they gave Wayne Tinkle a long-term deal, an extension, because he got them that far. That's great. I don't necessarily view him as the coach worthy of that extension because everything that Oregon State has done outside that Elite Eight run under Wayne Tinkle has been subpar at best. Coming to the WCC, they're still at bottom half of the conference team. That's the issue. They have some intriguing pieces, I would say. Obviously, DeMarco Minor coming in. You have 7'1" Matthew Marsh coming in from Wake Forest, talented enough to be on an ACC roster. And you have Fala coming from Southern Utah. They have some pieces coming in from some teams that have been competitive, but I think for the most part, this is still a team that has maybe one or two guys you think can be competitive at a top half level in the WCC and a lot of unknowns, a lot of pieces that don't necessarily fit together. And frankly, a coach that I think is a bottom half coach in this conference.
With Wayne Tinkle, it was a great run that he had, but he was relying a lot on coaches' kids in those glory years with Oregon State. When that started to dry up, that's when we've been seeing the issues pop up for Oregon State, and certainly do have high expectations for Washington State. Not that they're going to be necessarily on the same level of Gonzaga and St. Mary's, but a team that went to the NCAA tournament a season ago. It's going to be very much a fresh team with David Riley coming in from Eastern Washington and bringing a lot of friends with him. Dane Erickstrup, Cedric Coward, Ethan Price, Lahan Watts. I'm pretty sure that the Toa Boy is going to be coming with them as well, as this has become pretty much what Eastern Washington was a season ago, sans a few interesting players like Nate Kalmezi, who I think has a little bit of an upside. How do you take a look at this Washington State team that is in a lot of transition over the last few months?
Yeah, you've also got ND Okafor out of Cal, who I think is an intriguing pick to be pretty solid, not necessarily like all conference in the WCC, but pretty solid in the WCC. I like this team. I think they're going to be competitive. I think Riley is a fantastic coach. The brand of basketball he plays is exciting. It's fun, a little Gonzaga-esque in the way he likes to get up and down the court. To me, it just falls down to, can these guards play at an elite level, a top half level in the WCC? If they can handle St. Mary's in a game that starts to get down into that kind of 60 to 70 point threshold, if they can go up against the backcourt of Santa Clara and hold their own, this Washington State team should be pretty competitive. And again, unlike Wayne Tinkle, who I think as an X's and O's coach isn't that great, I think Riley, the sky's the limit for him, especially in the WCC. We'll see when Washington State makes their decision whether or not to move on or where they're going to move on from. They only have like a 2-year commitment with the WCC, but we'll see. But I like this team to finish kind of top 5-ish range in the WCC.
Yep, I'm in agreement with you. Not on par with St. Mary's or Gonzaga, but I like this Washington State team. And to your point, David Riley, a young, hungry coach that did a great job being able to retain his own from Eastern Washington, as Connor Hope, who does great work over at HXCBB, joining me for this WCC Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I think that this team is fascinating because when Shante Leggins got to Portland, ironically enough, another former Eastern Washington coach, year number one was great for him, but ever since then, things have went down the toilet bowl. There's been a lot of injuries with this team, but they bring back Chris Austin. I like Vukasin Masic, a nice double-figure 6'5", a little bit of a combo player, but this team gets ravaged in the transfer portal once again, so they're going to be looking at Max McKinnon, who comes in from Elon, guy that I really do like, and they've got size on this roster with Jeremiah Webb, hopefully I said that correctly. They bring in a freshman in Todd Jones, I think has a little bit of upside as well, but just feels like after year one for Portland under the Shante Leggins regime, things just have not gone right ever since then.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at Portland, the turnover is the name of the game for them. There's going to be a ton of it. They don't have their fallback options anymore. Like Tyler Robertson did a ton losing a fallback option like that. I think it's going to be some growing pains. They are still pretty big down low, but I need to see more from Leggins as a coach before I actually give them top half ceiling. But for now, I think I probably have more trust in them than I do in a guy in Oregon State, for example, to bring it all together. But just losing Robertson to me is perhaps the most impactful loss in the WCC, all things considered, because what he did for Portland in his 3 years there, especially last year as a fifth-year senior, 17 points per game, rebounder, kind of, you had to respect him from the three-point line. They lose that. I think it kind of hurts everyone else that's returning to not have that focal point of the offense taking a defense's entire attention.
Yeah, that is going to be a massive loss for them, and I am very bearish on Portland as a result of that. And I think that this is going to be interesting as well with Pepperdine moving on from Lorenzo Romar in the offseason. They bring in Ed Schilling, a guy that really hasn't had a lot of head coaching opportunities, but this guy's been an assistant darn near everywhere. He's a John Calipari disciple, followed him along at a few stops, both at the college and the pro level. He's been a part of Grand Canyon, Memphis, UCLA, Indiana. I'm pretty sure he spent some time at UW Oshkosh as well. Like, this guy has been a little bit of everywhere. And while this team doesn't necessarily have the sizzle of what we've seen in past years in terms of the names, I do think that he's a guy that understands the game, has been around for a very long time. Lone fear is that there might be some big time growing pains here in year number one for Pepperdine.
The issue with Pepperdine is that they were all flash and no substance under Romar. And that's kind of been Romar's MO during the last probably half decade of his time at UW and then his second stint at Pepperdine. They had Maxwell Lewis. He's had number one overall draft picks in the NBA draft and just nothing. I think bringing in a coach that can be an X's and O's guy, even if the flash of the names on the roster aren't there, it's huge. I think it's going to bring a change to Pepperdine. They're not going to be must-see TV for NBA people, but I think they're going to provide a lot more of a oomph to their game against the WCC. They have a lot of experience on this roster. And then some guys that I think, can do something. Aaron Clark coming in from Wake, averaged 10 points, 5 rebounds. Like that's huge for a 6'6" wing. If you can get him to reach his potential, Mo Odom coming in from Pacific, kind of doing his thing as the primary point guard. Like those two, I think, can provide enough for you offensively that the rest of the roster, with the length that it has, can be competitive in the middle of this conference.
I agree with you. As joining me on the show, we do have Connor Hope, who does such great work over at D-Check CBB, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and we'll see how this team responds to the disappointment of last year, and that'd be Loyola Marymount. Had some high expectations for them, and they just simply did not deliver on them. Stan Johnson, though, he's done a good job, in my opinion, of retooling this roster. Bringing in Myron Amy Jr. over at San Jose State was a guy that I really like, was able to fill up the stat sheet, nice, reliable scorer. Javon Porter, we were talking about those guys that had flash over at Pepperdine. He's of relation to Michael Porter in the NBA. He comes in. Alex Merkfeldez is back. You bring back Will Johnson. So you bring back some of the key pieces from last year. You revamp things, especially in the backcourt with having Caleb Stone-Carwell coming in as well for Loyola Marymount. I do think that there's quite a bit of upside with this roster.
You have, 4 double-digit scorers. I think Stone-Carwell can threaten to be that on this roster if he needs to. Jan Vide, I think, has been somewhat underappreciated. Maybe not good enough to play at the UCLA level, the Pac-12 or now Big Ten level, but he could be a solid wing in his sophomore season for this roster. And I agree with you. I think Stan Johnson's an excellent coach. I think there's been a lot that has gone on in that program that has kind of put him behind the 8 ball. And I don't want to make too many excuses for some of the disappointments that Loyola Marymount has had. But this is a roster, I think, middle of the conference is probably the floor. And I think they can compete for that. Probably 4th is their ceiling in this conference this year. But they've got some talent on that roster. And I like the direction it's going.
I do like the direction it's going as well. And then I take a look at what Santa Clara is bringing back, and I absolutely love it. They bring back Adama Ball, 6'7", do-it-all sort of player that I think can absolutely tear it up in this conference. Carlos Stewart is back. Johnny O'Neal at 6'10" is able to pop it from three. Christoph Tilly is a 7-footer that offers a lot of options. They bring back Brendan Napper. There is not too many mid-majors in this day and age that bring back the level of production and bring back the amount of minutes that Santa Clara does. And I'm not sure how you view this team, but I think that this is the dark horse that could really make things interesting in the WCC.
Santa Clara might be the one team besides Gonzaga that got better this offseason, or at least their prospects got better than what they ended up finishing last year. And again, last year, they beat Gonzaga at home. They had some solid talent that they're losing, but what they do bring back, outside of Carlos Marshall leaving, I think they bring back enough to compete. And I think they're probably the favorite to finish third right now. If you look at this roster, you mentioned Adama Ball could have easily, maybe not, obviously not NBA, but he could have easily gone and played pro anywhere he wanted. He comes back as a bigger guard. You mentioned Johnny O'Neal. Christoph Tilly, I think we've only scratched the surface of what his ceiling can be. We've seen him play really well in big moments in the WCC. Look down this roster. Even Cam Tung, who you look at him, 3 points, 1.5 rebounds a game, and as a WCC player, doesn't seem great, but he's a fantastic offensive option and just hasn't gotten the minutes. And I think if you give him the minutes at the 3-4, he can compete with some of the top wings in this conference, outside of Gonzaga and St. Mary. He's a pretty solid player. So I like this Santa Clara team. I think Herb Sendek has really sold me on what he does, especially in his backcourt. Tyree Bryan, I think, can go off. Carlos Stewart can be really good. Even Napper can have some solid play. So this backcourt has always been one that sells me. Bringing Carlos Stewart back, I think, was huge to really convincing me that this team is a top 3 team in the WCC.
Yep, I am right there with you. I absolutely love the fact that they bring back so many backcourt pieces. They've got so much size in this conference, so I'm pretty fired up for them. And then for San Francisco, they bring back a lot of guys from a season ago as well. Marcus Williams, he has been around college basketball here in the West Coast for a very long time. He's going to be back. The one big loss, though, Jonathan Mogbo. I thought that was one of the most significant draft decisions out there. He was pretty much the only guy for San Francisco that averaged north of 4 rebounds per game for a team that was very rock solid on glass. They're going to be looking to replace him with Carlton Lindgard Jr. Saba Gigabrea, he's going to need to step up quite a bit as well. 7'1" big man. So I want to get your thoughts on San Francisco, because even though they return a lot, I do think that loss of Mogbo was very significant.
Yeah, and I think last year the team relied a little bit too much on Mogbo down the stretch. Look, this was a team that last year we thought was built to be a tournament team. They looked like it during parts of the season last year, but it never really quite gelled. I don't know if we see that this year. I really like Erlifson as a coach, but I think if you were sold on him as like a disciple of that lineage at San Francisco, he's just not the same as the last 2 coaches. I like that they still have size. They still have 2 7-footers that promise to be pretty involved, especially when they play against a team like Gonzaga. Marcus Williams and Newberry, I think, can do a lot from an offensive perspective. You throw in Malik Thomas too, can do quite a bit coming in. He was great last year coming in from USC. It's a team that I think has the talent. My issue is that if you want to compete in the WCC, unless your name is St. Mary's or Gonzaga, I think you need a little bit more size in the backcourt, because I don't think you're going to beat either of those teams on skill or athleticism. And this San Francisco team, I think, just doesn't have that. You've got 5'11" Ryan Beasley, 6'1" Marcus Williams. Like Malik Thomas probably going to play a lot at the 2, but doesn't really give you a ton of size there. And then you've got the 2 7-footers, obviously, at the 5, but 1 through 4, they're a little bit undersized, and that worries me a little bit. I think the one thing that you can hope for is that last year for Issa Silva was an aberration. And if he can kind of find his way as a former Pac-12 player who kind of failed in some respects at Long Beach State, they're a good pick for 4th or 5th right there with Washington State, but I don't know if I'd go any higher than that.
Yep, I'm feeling that way as well. Middle to upper half of the conference, but not really able to bust through. As a man that always busts through with this great information, that'd be Connor Hope of Heat Check CBB joining me for this WCC Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And let's talk about a team that's absolutely people's money on fire. That'd be the Pacific Tigers. Worst team against the spread in all of college basketball the last 3 seasons. Worst team 2 out of 3 years, which when you've got north of 360 teams to be dead last against the spread 2 out of 3 years is like getting struck by lightning twice. But that said, for Pacific, it's a new dawn and a new day as they look to Dave Smart, who's a very accomplished coach out there in Canada at Carleton University. This guy won north of 650 games, spent a little bit of time over at Texas Tech. The transfer portal haul, I'm not going to be calling it amazing or anything like that, but just getting the stink out of what happened after you saw Damon Stoudemire take a job in the NBA. From there, Pacific was in mad scramble mode. Clearly, it did not go well. I think that this time around, just having a clean slate, bringing in a guy like a Jazz Gardner from Nevada, I do think is going to allow Pacific to just take baby steps, as this year probably not going to be their year, but building for 2025, 26, and beyond, I do like the prospects.
Yeah, I mean, talk about an undersized roster. You've got 7-foot Jazz Gardner. I don't know how much run Burke Smith is going to get at 6'11", and then Elijah Fisher's the only other player listed at over 6'4" that I think gets significant run in this rotation. But you're right. Like, I think Pacific is going to be a slow rebuild. It has to be. But you bring in Lamar Washington from Texas Tech, who I think instantly injects offense into this rotation. Elijah Fisher was at Texas Tech and then DePaul. He can do quite a bit. So this is a team that I think gets back, maybe not to the levels they were under Damon Stoudemire, but I think they get back a little bit to that scrappiness you saw under Damon Stoudemire, because I don't think Pacific can win any other way. The hurdles they have to jump through to recruit talent, I think they need to recruit scrappiness. And I think that's what this team has, that it's kind of lacked the last couple of years. But again, you're talking about a slow rebuild. I don't know if a team's that consistently bad against the spread, is it really lighting people's money on fire when they can kind of safely bet against the team? But it's a team that's going to be quite rough this year, but only have 2 seniors, I guess, on the roster. So as long as they can keep some of that talent, they should be pretty competitive in the middle of the conference the following year.
Yep, we're staring at a team that's probably going to be at the bottom this year, and it's just all about taking those baby steps forward. And this team, as we know, they are not going to need to take baby steps forward because they've been towards the top of the WCC for just oh so long. St. Mary's is going to be losing quite a bit from a season ago, as we know, with losing their top scorer from last year. That is going to be hurting them. In Mahaney deciding that he's going to be going to UConn, but he still have a lot of heart and soul pieces. Mitchell Saxon, very rock solid down low. I always get the last name wrong, but Augustus Mirasolinas, he's just a very versatile guy that's able to dole out the ball. And they brought in a few nice pieces as well. I like what Mikey Lewis is able to bring to the table. I think that he can come in right away and be a little bit of a contributor for this team. And even though you lose Mahaney in the offseason, St. Mary's should still be rock solid. And we know that Randy Bennett is going to get this team playing that slow, methodical style, playing efficiently on offense, and being rock solid on defense.
Part of the reason why St. Mary's is almost like talent proof in terms of losing talent, getting it back, what talent's on the roster, as long as they're kind of top 50 in talent, they should be pretty good, is because they keep it slow. Like, they're always within striking distance in, 90% of the games they play. We're talking about a team, they returned the WCC Player of the Year, the WCC Defensive Player of the Year, and we're still talking about them as if they had some awful offseason because they lost Aiden Mahaney to the 2-time defending national champions. We knew that Alex Dukas was leaving, right? So that leaves Josh Jefferson going home to UNLV as like the one loss that's tough to swallow. But look at what they bring in. You mentioned Mikey Lewis. I think he can contribute right away, but also you have Liam Campbell coming in, who should be really, maybe not this year, but at least within the next 2 years, could be really good. Jordan Ross showed a lot of promise last year, and I think he's not Aiden Mahaney, but he can be really solid offensively for this team alongside Marshall Onis. Ashton Hardaway comes in as a transfer, but for me, Paulius Morauskas might be the most intriguing player in this conference that doesn't play for Gonzaga, because he transfers in as a promising kind of stretch 4 option from Arizona that didn't get a lot of run because Arizona's really good. But I think he could play that Joshua Jefferson stretch 4 role maybe better than Jefferson did, at least more consistently than Jefferson did. If he gets going and you put him with Mitchell Saxon being a really good low post scorer, with Marshallonis handling the ball, you've got Jordan Ross, who's also a threat to score. Morawski's going to have a ton of space to work, and I think that's going to benefit him. If I had to choose a newcomer of the year just off the bat, that wasn't a Gonzaga newcomer, because I think a Gonzaga newcomer wins that award this year, Morawskis would be my pick, and that's why I think St. Mary's is still a very safe bet to finish second in the conference, perhaps even threaten Gonzaga in Moraga and make the tournament as like a 9-10 seed. I just think we're overblowing the loss of Aidan Mahaney and not appreciating what this team brings in to replace him.
I always like to use this saying on the show, but it holds oh so true for St. Mary's. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts when it comes to this team. As Connor Ope, who does great work over at HXCBB, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soups. And we got two teams left to hit. One is obviously Creme de la Creme, and then let's take a look at the San Diego bunch, where Steve Lavin, he's been trying to get things online for this team, hasn't necessarily gone his way the first few years, but he does return two main guys. Steven Jamerson, top rebounder down low at 6'10". I think that he's going to do a rock solid job there. Wayne McKinney III, nice bucket getter in the backcourt. Lots of uncertainty outside of that. They've been looking to the transfer portal over the last few years, and after he got in just a whole bunch of like Power 5 conference transfers in the first few years, not as much of that this year. But when it comes to San Diego, my biggest fear is that they're just a little bit top heavy, because I look at Jamerson and McKinney. Those guys are rock solid. What does everyone else provide is my question with them.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that, because I think there are just so many question marks outside of those two that you're really just going to have to see what happens, right? And I remember when Lavin first came to San Diego, my comment to you was, it's all about getting eyes on the television screen. It's all about getting butts in the seats. And he hasn't had them good enough to maintain that. Like, there was some excitement coming in the first year, and they've had stretches of games where you thought maybe they were starting to break through. But, after a very promising start to last year, where I think they won like 10 of their first 15 games or something like that, they started off WCC play. Granted, tough stretch. Started off with 6 straight losses, then went 6-1, and then finished with 3 straight losses and a win at home against Pacific. So this is a very hot and cold team last year that I just want to see be a little bit more consistent. And if they do that, they can creep up into that kind of 6-7 range in the conference. But you're right. I mean, if there's no consistency and they're just relying on Jamerson and McKinney to do everything for them offensively, this is a team that I think is going to be a little bit floundering for most of the season.
Yep, right there with you. Those top two are big. Can they get a number 3? Can they just get some consistency out of the rest of those guys? And let's take a look at the team that, if you don't have them number 1, you let me know why. Because Gonzaga, even though they got the bad news about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, that Steel Ventures is going to be out for the year, yeah, absolutely love what they've got coming back. Graham Ike was able to do a nice job down low and really improved his range ever since he was over at Wyoming. They bring back Nolan Hickman, Ryan Nembhard into the backcourt. You've got a 50% three-point shooter, Michael Ajayi, who has familiarity within the conference. They bring in K-Leaf Battle and so much more. And I'll give you the floor here on your expectations for Gonzaga, because I think the real question is not whether or not they're going to be able to win the conference, but what they can do on the national landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. And last year when Venters got hurt, he got hurt the day before the season started, like 4 days before their first game. I moved them down. I think I had them 11 or 12. I moved them down to 19 entering the season. They obviously started worse than that and eventually creeped their way back up to the point where they were a Sweet 16 team. When Venters got hurt this time around, not that you ever want someone to get hurt. It certainly isn't good for Gonzaga, but I didn't move them at all. I still have them in that 7 to 8 range nationally. I just think they have so many weapons that losing basically just a pure shooter doesn't really impact my view of them. We've seen Nolan Hickman be a good 3-point shooter. We've seen Ryan Nembhard be a good 3-point shooter. We've seen K-Leaf Battle in the past be a good 3-point shooter. Obviously, Michael Ajayi shot really well last year. Dusty Stromer was a freshman last year, thrust into a position that he shouldn't have been asked to be in. Moved him to the bench, was a very good effort defender. I think kind of started finding his way offensively, but he came in as a promising shooter. Ben Gregg can stretch the floor. Braden Huff, Graham Ike have both shown the ability to shoot quite a bit. Like the only rotational piece on this roster that I don't trust at all shooting the three is Emmanuel Innocenti. And I think he's going to be kind of, if they need to go 9 deep and use him defensively, that's where he's going to find his minutes. But there's so much offensive firepower around Graham Ike being one of the best low post scorers and Ryan Nemhard being one of the best ball distributors and playmakers for others in the country, that if Gonzaga isn't top 2 in offensive efficiency this year, I'd be surprised. And I don't know if that's bold anymore because they're generally top 2 in good years. But if they're not number 1, they're probably a close second. They just have too many weapons for me to doubt them. Nationally, defense could be an issue because Ben Gregg, Dusty Stromer are more effort defenders than they are like innately good defenders. Dusty Stromer can be a good on-ball defender at times, but he lacks the athleticism against really athletic guards. So you're going to need to see Michael Ajayi step up a little bit because he wasn't a great defender last year, but part of me feels like that might be a Romar issue. And I think Graham Ike, if he can defend without fouling, can be pretty good. We'll see. But this team is going to be just as exciting as always to watch. They bring everybody back pretty much except for Anton Watson, which was good. And immediately so. Like everyone in that locker room after the loss said they were coming back. That level of chemistry to me says that this could be a special season for Gonzaga.
Yep, right there with you. In a day and age where we see so much turnover with Gonzaga bringing back so many guys, I think that's going to be a great year for them. Just like I know that's going to be a great year for all of you guys over at eCheck CBB. Connor, I know that you're doing such great work taking a look at college basketball, so let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, right now, a couple of Gonzaga grads and I started up a Gonzaga podcast. I'll start linking that when the first one is released, which should be, I think, this upcoming Monday, just talking about expectations for the season and stuff like that. We're working on our season previews for Heat Check. So those will start rolling out sometime in mid-October. Other than that, just you can follow me on Twitter at HoopsHopesCBB and follow all the work that we're doing at Heat Check over at heatcheckcbb.com. I think we're gonna start putting out a lot of content over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. We now have clarity on all these rosters. It figures to be an absolutely amazing year, one where we now have 364 D1 teams, and very strange to be seeing the WCC with a few added teams, but Connor does a great job rolling with all the punches, and every single time he joins me lends such great insight. So big thanks to Connor for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VCC Family Podcast. And coming next, this is the WCC Conference Preview Edition, so got to give you guys my projector or finish for the conference. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VCC Family Podcast. Was great to be able to get Connor up aboard. He does such an incredible job over at eCheck CBB, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love. I get him on every single year for the WCC Conference Preview Edition because he delivers every single time. I know that he is hard at work getting set for what is going to be a tremendous upcoming season, and it's always great to be able to get his insights. So big thanks to Connor for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector or finish for the WCC, and since I am doing a conference preview edition today, that means that the past 48 hours of college basketball news and notes that we saw, that is going to be polished up on the podcast tomorrow. So anything that I missed from Thursday, that is going to be taken care of because we want to give as much sparkle and shine to these teams when we do a conference preview as much as humanly possible. And how about if we dive in right now with our projector or finish dead last team, and that would be Pacific. And for Pacific, I think that things are going to be moving in the right direction for them. I think that they made a hire that is going to be able to help them out a little bit more in the long term in Dave Smart, a guy that, well, he is very smart in terms of the game of basketball, but you had a team that didn't have a single double-figure scorer last year. They bring back darn near nothing from that team last year, other than Burke Smith, who's 6'11", as we were talking about with Connor Hope. You just don't have a lot of size for the team. They bring in Jazz Gardner, who was on the bench for Nevada last season. I think that he'll be able to come in. He'll be able to give the team some good contributions. And you bring in Lamar Washington from Texas Tech. Wasn't able to see a whole bunch of minutes, but you know what? He should be a nice shining star for the team. But it's going to be based around he and Elijah Fisher to help out a team that I still cannot believe that Pacific was dead last in the country in terms of their overall cover turnover rate 2 out of the last 3 years. Like, how is that even possible? And you don't have a lot of three-point shooting with the team as well. Elijah Fisher is a former top 100 recruit. The Texas Tech pipeline certainly strong on this one, with Smart serving as a little bit of an assistant over there. And for Fisher, he was able to be a starter for DePaul last year, 10 points per contest, but also shot about 26.5% from three-point range. The team has honestly a little bit of depth. Peter Kachapik, hopefully I said that correctly. He's someone that's 6'4". He's going to be coming in after he spent some time with Florida International, but Florida International was so poor on defense that it's not even funny as well. Jefferson Koulibaly should be able to give you a little bit of something off the bench, but having no size to speak of other than Jazz Gardner and having just a complete rebuild over there at Pacific, I think that it's going to be a rough year, number one. I've got them dead last in terms of my projector finish. At number 10, I'm going to be going with Portland. It was said very well by our good friend Connor Hope. Portland, a team that is ranked in the bottom 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, really since season number 1 under Shante Leggins. It doesn't get a whole heck of a lot better with Tyler Robertson being out of the fold. Now, if they can get Chris Austin to be what he was a few seasons ago, is he missed the 2022-23 season due to injury, was able to come back during the 2023-24 season, but you could tell that he wasn't his normal self. He was averaging about 7 points per contest last season, did shoot about 36.5% from 3, but during that 2021-22 campaign, he was putting up 14.5 points, 4 boards, shipping in there 2 assists. If they're able to get a little bit more out of him, that's going to be very beneficial. And Vukasin Masic is someone I really like. He began his career out there in the northeast part of the country and became a really nice do-it-all sort of player for this team. 12.5 points, 3 assists, 4 rebounds per game for a Portland budget. They were an okay team at being able to bomb it from three-point range, but they play relatively fast. They play zero defense whatsoever. You lose Tyler Harris, who had good versatility. He was able to shoot up about 36% from three-point range. Juan Sebastian Gorosito was very good at being able to help out in the backcourt as well. You lose all of these guys, and you really don't replace them with a lot of substance. Max McKinnon was a double-figure scorer over at Elon, but he was pretty much a guy that on some nights he was going to be a number 1 option, on some nights he was going to be a number 3 option. Has a versatility at 6'5" to be able to grab a few rebounds, and Todd Jones as a true freshman at 6'8". I do think that he's going to be able to come in, want some versatility, be able to grab a few rebounds, but have my question marks down low with this team. They really just didn't bring in a lot other than McKinnon in the transfer portal, and they needed to bring in quite a bit in my opinion. I just think that Portland lacks the talent to be able to ascend in this conference. I've got them number 10 in terms of my projector finish. At number 9, I'm going to be going with Pepperdine. With Pepperdine, they bring in Ed Schilling, a guy that has been a big-time grinder in college basketball for a very long time, but he's left with, let's call it what it is, not necessarily a ton of talent. I actually really like Mo Odom. Mo Odom was a part of that Pacific team that, once again, was a flaming dumpster fire a season ago, but he was pretty much the only guy on that team that I thought was genuinely playing hard. 8.5 points, 4.5 assists, not a guy that's going to light it up from three-point range yet. That's a departure from what Pepperdine has been. Like, they had Michael Ajayi last year, shoot about 50% from three-point range. Now you're looking at a little bit of a new-look group. They bring in Javion Cooley. He was playing over at Marist the last few seasons, and he's a guy that's able to pop it from three-point range. Wasn't necessarily an explosive scorer, but he's a guy that is going to bring his lunch pail. He was part of one of the better mid-major defenses in all of college basketball. Zion Bethea, he's a guy that has played at the northeast part of the country in so many different capacities. Was at St. Francis of New York, Hofstra, Delaware. So this is going to be school number 4 in 4 years from. He was passed around like a basket of breadsticks, and for Zion Bethea, this is just a little bit of a rehab year for him as well. He was limited to fewer than 5 games a season ago, so if Zion Bethea is able to pick up where he was, I would say about 2 years ago with St. Francis of New York, where he was getting 10.5 points, was a nice 42% three-point shooter, you're looking at something, but it was a pretty gruesome injury that he suffered last season. Then we got Babakar Koulibaly. He was over at USC to begin his career, just has been having issues staying out there on the court, has never played more than 15 games in all 4 of his seasons. A lot of upside with him. 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.7 blocks per game when he was actually out there on the court. Question is he going to be staying out there on the court? You've got a lot of injury concerns when it comes to this Pepperdine team. You've got someone in Stefan Torvich, who just has never necessarily seen a big-time role, whether that was with SMU, whether that was with the Dons of San Francisco. So you've got some interesting pieces. I just don't know how it's going to come together in year number 1. Fred Schilling, I think that he's brought in the right guys to be able to help this team ascend moving forward, but do think that it's going to be a rough season number 1. So do have Pepperdine at number 9 in my projector finish. At number 8, I'm going to be going with Oregon State. For Oregon State, stepping down a level is going to be big for them because This team the last few seasons ever since that Elite 8 run just kept getting blowtorched time and time again, but you have to pick up all the pieces from a season ago. No longer do you have Jordan Pope. He was a really nice go-to scorer, shot 37% from 3, 17.5 points per game, and then Tyler Blodeau, he was very much the just guy that would do a little bit of everything for the team, 14 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Losing him is big. Michael Rotage, he's going to be back. He's able to give you right around about 6 boards, 8 points per game, and you've got some size with him being right around about 6'9". You've been able to do a nice job retaining a lot of the big men from this team, but it's not like the big men were necessarily skilled. They're not guys that are necessarily going to be spacing the floor. You bring in Matthew Marsh, someone that's 6'1". It's been a little bit hit or miss for him throughout his college basketball career as he was over at Wake Forest and just didn't get a lot of run while he was over at Wake Forest. Persa Falah, he comes in from Southern Utah, and while he was over at Southern Utah, relatively solid rebounder, but not a guy that's going to be spacing the floor. And now you're having to trust in the offense to DeMarco Minor. DeMarco Minor was a solid player over at SIU Edwardsville. How he's going to be translating to the WCC is a big giant question, and we've just seen it with Oregon State. They've got a massive home court advantage. Going to Corvallis is a very tough place to play. When this team hits the road, it goes all the way down the tubes for them, and for this bunch, even though they do have quite a bit of size, they don't necessarily do a great job down low, and you're going to need to have Mr. Minor come up very, very major for the team, as he is a little bit of a do-it-all sort of player. 15.5 points, 8.5 boards, 3 assists per game, but again, that was at the OVC level. Now he's going to be seeing much more competition, much more versatility. Shot only about 31.5% from three-point range, losing that scoring pop that they had from last season, which was really a saving grace for Oregon State. I think is going to be a big deal, and one that is not going to be great for them. So I do have Oregon State as a result at number 8 in terms of my projector finish. At number 7, I'm going to take a leap of faith here. I'm going to be going with San Diego. For San Diego, they've got 2 really nice building blocks from a bunch that, well, they were not great on defense. They were, once again, in the bottom 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Didn't do a bad job of being able to guard the 3. They really got just handled when they were down low, but you do have coming back Wayne McKinney, number 2 scorer from a season ago, 13.5 points, shot 34% from three-point range, and Steven Jamerson missed the first few games of the season last year, but 8.5 points, 8 boards, block per contest. And Keon Kenzie, I think, is a little bit of an upside guy. He was able to give the team about 3.5 points, a little bit over 2 boards per contest. Not a guy that's going to go out there, pop it from three-point range or anything like that. Was a little bit surprised, though, that San Diego didn't make more moves in the transfer portal than they did. They've got a few freshmen there coming in that should be able to give you a little bit of something, but the question becomes, which of these guys, out of like a Cody Clow, they went to the junior college level to bring in a few guys, which of these guys are really going to be able to pop? Are you going to be able to get anything out of Santiago Triut, who was from the roster a season ago, comes in from Argentina? He's another guy that's able to hit the glass, about 4 rebounds per contest. Are you going to be able to see him ascend after he was limited to 11 games last year? But I do like the fact that they've got 2 top flight guys that are going to be returning. I think that they're going to be able to do a nice job down low. This team is just chock full of size. You pretty much have 2 guys on the roster that are shorter than 6'5", and I think that that's going to be a little bit of an issue for a lot of these teams out there in the WCC. Steve Lavin saw that there was a lot of weakness down low. He was able to address that. So I do think that San Diego going to be able to make some inroads to be able to get towards the middle of the conference, especially with the bottom teams very much in a rebuild. So do have San Diego at number 7 in terms of my projector finish. At number 6, I'm going to be going with Loyola Marymount. I'm starting to be a little bit more out on our man Stan the Man Johnson, but I love the fact that he brings in Myron Amy Jr. Myron Amy Jr., this guy was a double-figure scorer over at San Jose State. He's someone that I think is really going to be able to elevate this program after last season. They had on paper really nice pieces, and I thought that they were going to be in the upper half of the conference. Went straight down the toilet bowl for them, but MJ Amy, he's able to give you 15.5 points, 5 boards, 3 assists in the Mountain West, shot 36% from three-point range. I think that he's going to be a good floor general for this team, a guy that's sort of been there, done that. And then Alex Merkfeldez, just year in and year out, he's able to give you about 10 points per game. And Javon Porter was a little bit banged up, but he is someone that knows all about this conference. He was over at Pepperdine last year. I was talking with Connor Ope about his just pedigree, him being of relation to Michael Porter, and he's at 6'11", a guy that last year had 16 points per game. Didn't necessarily shoot it great from three, but he's still able to pop it from three-point range. This guy, if he can just play a lick of defense, I do think that Coach Johnson going to be able to get a little bit more defense into this team. I do think that there's quite a bit of upside here for Loyola Marymount. For Marymount, I just feel like they haven't necessarily found their style. Like one year they go fast, one year they go slow. I feel like Stan Johnson is just sort of guessing in terms of what his team has, and they were a good three-point shooting team last year. They were a top 35 team in all of college basketball with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, but they just couldn't generate any turnovers whatsoever. They were a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per-game basis. I think that they did a nice job being able to help out with that. John Vide should be able to help out there. Caleb Stone-Carwell is a guy that has played for some relatively solid defenses. Over at Utah Valley last year, they were able to do a relatively rock-solid job there, and he was a nice go-to scorer over at Austin P a few seasons ago as well. I think that there's some relatively solid depth, so as a result, Loyola Marymount, number 6 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 5, I'm going with San Francisco. The Dons of San Francisco were a top 35 team in the country in terms of rebound rate last season. That despite the fact that they had only one guy pulling in north of 4 rebounds per game last season, and that was Jonathan Mogbo. Guess who's out for them? Jonathan Mogbo. Now, I like Carlton Lingard, what he's able to provide. He's a 7-footer that last year was able to stretch the floor. Like, Carlton Lingard shot right around about 34 to 35% from three-point range. This guy is one that I really like. Began his career over at Kansas State. He, last year, was over at UTSA, meet for the Roadrunners, where he had 9.5 points. Shot relatively okay from three-point range. He's able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, a block and a half per contest, so he's going to be able to help out this team. But we were mentioning it with Connor. The fact that you don't necessarily have a ton of size. I do like the fact that you bring back Marcus Williams, who he had that really good freshman year at Wyoming, and now he spent about 15 additional years in college basketball. Has never really captured that same magic, shooting about 34% for three-point range, but the guy that really needs to step up for them, Niwidu Newberry, he was able to shoot 40% from three-point range, 9.5 points, 3.7 rebounds per game. I like what he's able to bring to the table, but losing a guy, Mongolian Mike, as well, who was just able to do a little bit of everything. He wasn't necessarily that go-to scorer, but just whatever you needed out of him, he was able to provide it. That's going to be a little bit of a loss, and Malik Thomas is going to need to pick up a lot of that as well. I'm just out on Issa Silva. Issa Silva began his career at Stanford, did nothing there. At Long Beach State, he was about as useful as a poopy-flavored lollipop, so there's some issues there. Robbie Beasley is a guy that's never really been able to form into what I was expecting, as well as both of the Beasleys do have a few question marks there. So as a result, with San Francisco, do have them at number 5 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 4, I'm going with Washington State. This might as well be Eastern Washington 2.0, because that's the way that the roster shook out, and you've got the coach of that fine team and David Riley. But I do like what he's able to bring to the table with so many of these guys. Dane Erikstrup is a guy that at 6'11" is able to pop it from three-point range. Cedric Howard, he had 6'4", 6'5", is oh so fearless, as he's able to do such a nice job finding a way to be able to get a rebound, get second chances. He's able to pop it from three-point range himself. It's really positionless basketball. It's a team that I think is going to be playing quite a bit more up-tempo than they did under Kyle Smith a season ago. You're bringing Ethan Price, who does a nice job being able to give you 12 points, a little bit over 2 assists per game. The one thing that I would say with this team is who's going to be the main guy that facilitates, because Elias Magnuson was the only guy from that Eastern Washington team a season ago. And yes, I'm pretty much going to call it Eastern Washington at this point, because that's where most of these guys are coming from, that average north of 2.2 assists per game. So you do have to wonder who's going to be that main facilitator. Are you going to be getting a little bit more out of someone like an Isaiah Watts? Is that going to be perhaps a freshman in Marcus Wilson? We shall see, but Nate Calmezzi, I think, is really the X factor, as I still remember when he was over in the Southland a few seasons ago. This guy was a microwave scorer, was limited due to injury and just stepping up a level last season. While he was over at Washington, only averaged 4.1 points per contest last season. 2 seasons ago, came up from the junior college level at 17.5 points, drilled 36.5% of his threes. Never, though, really a true facilitator, only about 2 assists per game while he was over at Lamar. So the question mark of who's going to facilitate, it is there, but you've got guys that are able to shoot. You've got nice positionless basketball, a team that is going to be very much willing to play up tempo. I do think that David Riley, one of the good young coaches in all of college basketball, gets things going here at Washington State. I've got them number 4 in terms of my projected projector or finish. At number 3, I'm going with Santa Clara. Santa Clara brings back so much from last season. In a day and age where you see so many departures, you see so many guys decide that they're not coming back, they bring back pretty much 3/4 of their scoring, including Adama Ball. Adama Ball is someone that I really like. A gentleman that was an international recruit of Arizona way back in the day. This past season, he was able to put up a nice double-figure amount of points per game, and from three-point range can be a little bit hit or miss, but shot about 35.5% from three-point range, is able to give you about 3 assists per game, and at 6'6", he's just so hard to guard and so crafty in the way that he's able to dole it out. And Santa Clara, one of the better teams in terms of hitting the glass in this conference with 7-foot Christoph Tilley. You've got a 6'10", 6'11" gentleman in Johnny O'Neal who's able to pop it from three-point range. Last year shot about 32.5% from 3, 11 points, 5.5 rebounds per contest. The team as a whole, they were really good at guarding the three-point arc as well. Top 50 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They did a nice job being able to win the battle on glass time and time again. A top 50 team in terms of their overall rebound rate as well. And that I think is going to be able to win out. And then you bring back Carlos Marshall as well. Carlos Marshall, 13 points, 42.5% three-point shooter. As a matter of fact, each of your top 4 scorers and 5 out of your top 6 scorers from last season are back, as you've got Brenton Napper, who was missing for about 10 games last season. He returns. He's a 38.5% three-point shooter. You've got size, you've got rebounding, and you've got three-point shooting. And in the WCC, that's going to give you a shot. I've got Santa Clara as a result. Number 3 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 2, this should come as no surprise. It's going to be St. Mary's. St. Mary's, a top 5 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis once again last season, and it was a little bit of tough sledding in the first few games with regards to the offense. They were just missing a lot of threes early on, and the schedule just lent them with a few bad matchups in general, and just in general. I mean, not to make excuses for them, but they just didn't play very well, and then they were able to find their form. That's what St. Mary's does. You've got Randy Bennett, one of the more respected and one of the better coaches in all of college basketball. Now he has to replace Ada Mahaney. That is going to be a very difficult task, but if there is a coach that's able to do it, it is him. And we were talking about with Connor Hope, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts with St. Mary's, because we're all talking about Mahaney being out, and he was the top scorer for the team last season with about 14 points, shot 35.5% from three-point range. But Augustus Miroselinas, 12.5 points, 5.3 assists, does a nice rock-solid job there for a team that just doesn't beat themselves. Only about 10 turnovers per contest a season ago. They do such a good job on the glass. In terms of percentage of opponent shots that result in an offensive rebound, top 10 team in the country. They do not give you second chances. And that top rebounder from a season ago, Mitchell Saxon, he is back in the fold after he was able to get the team right around about 11.5 points, 7.6 rebounds per game. Now, they do lose a few pieces from the season ago, not having Joshua Jefferson. That is going to hurt a little bit, but Harry Wessels is a 7'1" big man that I think is going to be able to step in, take his place. Mikey Lewis is someone that's a little bit underrated as a freshman as well at 6'3". I think that he's going to be able to make some nice contributions as well. And the guy that I'm really looking out for this season, I think that Jordan Ross is going to be able to have a nice season as well. And also keep in mind, Ashton Hardaway, yes, of that Hardaway pedigree from Memphis, he's going to be coming in, and I do think that there's quite a bit of upside there as well. If he's able to buy into a little bit more of a defensive approach, and I think that he's going to be able to do so. The St. Mary's team, they always play super duper slow. They always do a great job on defense. They always execute their stuff. I've got them number 2 in terms of my projector or finish, and let's call it what it is. Number 1 in terms of my projector or finish, we're going to be going with Gonzaga. Gonzaga, they finished number 2 in the conference last year, which was a big giant upset, but you can tell that things were just a little bit disjointed early on their season. You had Ryan Nembhard just really needing to learn the offense in general, and then once he was able to find it, boy oh boy was he able to find it. 7 assists per contest, a top 10 mark among qualifying Division I players a season ago, and really other than Anton Watson, everyone is back. Braden Huff, as a freshman, was able to give you 9 points per contest. He was a nice find for this team. Graham Ike, he was able to work on his range last season. He didn't take a lot of threes, but when he took them, he made them. He shot 37% from three-point range. Nolan Hickman was a 41% three-point shooter a season ago. He's able to facilitate when needed, but was very good off the ball. And now you've got Michael Ajay, a 50% three-point shooter for within the conference, coming in as well. This team was once again back in the top 10 in terms of two-point shooting percentage, and that's what I love about Gonzaga, because we always talk about the offensive efficiency, back in the top 10 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Oh, that happens every single year. But what is always consistent with Gonzaga, because some of their teams from three-point range, they're never bad from three-point range, but some of them are a little bit more milquetoast. Some of them are just a little bit more generic. They always do a good job driving that ball down low. They're always doing a good job being able to get good, wide open two-point shots. This team was able to do a very rock-solid job on the glass towards the back half of the season. And certainly the defense probably going to have its question marks, and not having the man of steel, Venters hurts. But when you bring in someone like a K-Leaf Battle, who has been a double-figure scorer at multiple stops, was able to average 15 points per game, albeit on an Arkansas team that was a little bit less than savory last season, but he's a career 35.5% three-point shooter. I still remember that small sample size that he had at Temple, go Owls, during the 2021-22 season, where he averaged 21.5 points per contest. Not a guy that you need to facilitate, but you're not going to need him to. I think that he's a perfect fit for a Gonzaga team that has all sorts of weapons and great depth. I've got Gonzaga number one in terms of my projector or finish, and that'll wrap things up for the WCC Conference Preview Edition right here on Cuts Cuts Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family podcast. A big thanks to Connor Hope of HXCBB for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Cuts Cuts Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at June_D1. Keep in mind, letters M, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'll be with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season, off season. It does not matter. I am with you guys all throughout, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.